Greetings, friends. The Gaming Author here, and welcome to the fourth and final prologue chapter for our D&D campaign. And I'm here with a good friend of mine and our fourth player. Feel free to introduce yourself if you want.
Howdy, folks. My name's Amelia.
Yeah, and for now we will go ahead and, I suppose, just jump right on in. After this, we'll finally be able to get the main story started. Alright, so if you have everything and you're ready, I'll go ahead and jump right on in.
In theory, I have everything.
Alright, perfect. So, let me go ahead and make sure the audio is balanced out. Alright. Okay, perfect. So far, everyone's began in different parts of the world, and as for you, you start in your hometown, unlike pretty much everyone else. You begin in the city of Livia, which is the capital of the Orlivia province. And you've known this city for pretty much as long as you can remember, and you've been a long-running member of the Church of Giselle here. And the city of Livia, it's set up kind of in a hexagonal sort of way. And your church is located kind of at the very top point. You're actually right behind the castle where the royal family lives, and so every time you kind of come and go, you do often see them every now and again. You know the king and queen on a first-name basis, Garen Leonhardt and Lenora Moranthia. They're both good friends of yours and good friends of the church, and our story begins in the late afternoon, and you're actually outside the church right now. The sun's pretty high. It's kind of overcast. There are a few clouds here and there, but so far it's been a pretty calm morning. And before you can hear the sound of the northern hooded river rushing. It's still kind of rather far from where you are because that's the province between Orlivia and Washorik, as you've come to know. But you can definitely hear it out in the distance. And as you're sitting here, would you like to go ahead and describe your character and what she might be doing?
Yeah, so Soren is kind of a medium height human female. She has very pale skin and very pale blonde hair. She's dressed in some very typical plain, dark priest, whatever garb the people of the church there would be wearing. And the thing that stands out the most, though, is she has this somewhat ornate silver metal, almost an eye patch, but it actually covers both of her eyes. She does not have any sight. And it's inscribed with some different runes and such that kind of tell the story of her past. She finds it easier to just have that fully on display so that she doesn't have to answer a lot of questions. And then sitting on her left shoulder is her familiar, a raven named Ias, and he is her eyes for her.
All right, perfect. And what would your character be doing out here, just kind of sitting out by the church?
At this time of the day, she's probably between services or between research or whatever it is that she's been up to during the day, so she's probably just taking a simple break.
All right, fair enough. And so with that being the case, you're just sitting here, kind of enjoying the just the sounds of the nature around you. And from your left, oh, I was just saying that you're just sitting out here enjoying the nature, kind of in between services, and from the left, you hear kind of like a snapping twig, and as you look over, you don't necessarily see anything, but you definitely heard something. Just over towards the left on the other side of the church building, because right now you're on the back, and you clearly heard something coming from the what would be your left. What would you like to do?
Certainly, I'll stand up from my position and see if I can get a better look, see if I spot anything.
All right, go ahead and make a perception check.
That is going to be a whopping 6.
All right. So yeah, looking over there, you don't necessarily see anything. You don't really hear anything else either. You just heard that one snapping, and kind of makes you think maybe you're just hearing things. It's been a long morning, just kind of taking a break anyway. And then you go ahead and turn back around, and as you do, you see a figure pop up right in front of you. It's a familiar one, though. It's a. Are you using your familiar to see right now?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, perfect. Okay, just wanted to double check. So before you see kind of this young man who looks to be about 17, 18, with like short cropped brown hair. He's got like a very uh, tan complexion. He's got like deep brown eyes, and he's clad in like the same church robes you are, just kind of these black robes with a cloak over it. And he just kind of looks up at you, and you know this to be your good friend Ben Soltris. He's been serving in the church for not quite as long as you have, but he joined not long after you joined. And as he pops up, he just goes and tells you, or my apologies, I'm not thinking clearly. He pulls out a twig and he tosses it to you. Do you try to catch it or anything?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, go ahead and for this, make I suppose, just a straight dexterity check.
Okay, that is going to be a 19.
Wow. All right. Yeah. You actually, yeah, you go ahead and just straight up catch it, and as soon as it falls into your hand, you can you look down on it and you can feel it. It begins to kind of transform and flourish, and you can see that this wooden, like just kind of withered wood, starts transforming into a bouquet of flowers, and it's like a random assortment of like roses and daisies, and it's just even flowers you haven't even seen around the region. And Ben just crosses his arms and says, "You're getting pretty good."
Well, that's a cute trick. Where'd you learn that?
Well, I prefer to keep my secrets to myself. I'm sure you understand.
Fine, I can understand that.
Alright, in any case, I came for a reason. Lucius said he wished to see us both inside the chapel. Do you think you could accompany on my way there?
Oh, sure, you want your stick back?
No, that's fine, you can keep it. I've got plenty, and I mean, he kind of looks around at the ground and they're just all scattered and broken. He's all, I could care less about these old twigs, turn them all into whatever I want.
Right, thanks, I'll use it in my room then.
Alright then. And then he goes ahead and walks around the same corner he came from. And do you follow?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, as you go ahead and turn the corner to the other side of the church building, you're greeted by the general commercial district around here. Like I mentioned, the church is just behind the castle where the royal family lives, and the church is surrounded more or less by grasslands, but once you head just barely outside the front entrance of the church, it's not only do you just kind of run into the back walls of the castle, but straight ahead you can kind of hear the murmur of the general public out in the commercial district. You can see people passing by, riding carriages, and you can hear like the horse hooves clacking against the cobblestone streets and the wooden wheels kind of squeaking and turning as they cross the district. And then you follow Ben towards the entrance to the Church of Giselle. Now, this building isn't exactly the grandest of churches. I mean, from your perspective, you haven't really seen many others. The only ones you're really familiar with are the main six here in the city of Olivia. And or Livia, my apologies. And this, like, each one is dedicated to one of the main known gods. And this one is dedicated to Giselle, which is known as the kind of the moderator god, but it depends on who you ask. Some see her as the one true god, while others more or less see her as just someone who kind of keeps the other gods in check and makes sure, almost like a single person checks and balances sort of deal. But regardless, she is someone who has helped the province of Orlivia for quite some time, and the people you've known in the church have been quite welcoming and kind. And Ben here, he's definitely not as stuck up as a lot of the people in the church, as far as you've known in the past, but he does devote himself to like the teachings and everything about that, and he likes studying the history of not only Giselle but other gods and just kind of seeing how they compare in a way. But anyway, as you approach this building, uh, it's about 30 feet wide and 15 feet high. You go up to the open archway that's just carved out from stone. You enter, and inside, you can kind of hear the faint hum of a group singing hymns in one of the rooms. But you just go ahead and walk through, and on both sides of you, there are just wooden chairs lining the chapel. Ben goes ahead and leads you up to the front, and there are a few members of the church all wearing the same black cloth that you two are wearing, but there's this one man in particular who's actually wearing white cloth, and he's got this kind of rounded tall hat over his head with like a green stripe down it, and he's a very tall man. He is very clearly human. He's got like this very pale skin, these bright green eyes that almost look like they're glowing, and kind of salt and peppered hair. He's a little up there in age, but not very old. Like, you'd probably guess he's around his late 40s ish. But he's just sitting up at the front of the chapel, and he's fervently writing something. And he's standing up, but he's like hunched over and leaning down on this desk that you normally should be sitting at to use, but for whatever reason he's standing. And Ben walks up to him, kind of puts his hand on the desk, and he goes, "Well, Lucius, I've brought her." And he kind of gestures towards you. He looks up at you and he goes, "Oh, good, okay. Soren, have you prepared your speech for the next sermon?"
Uh, Out of character, have I? Did I know
Uh,
about this in advance?
you did not. I will tell you that much. This is just like, you could actually go ahead and make a quick insight check for me.
Okay. That's a 19 on the die plus 4, so...
Jeez. All right, yeah. You can tell Lucius he has not slept in a long time. He is just scrambling to get whatever work done. You don't know what work he's doing from the looks of it. It looks like it's a lot of... He almost looks like an office worker from this perspective, more than
Okay.
like a man of the cloth, but he has no idea what's going on, and...
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will respond... Well, it seems to me, Lucius, that you might have forgotten to tell me about it, but I'm sure I could come up with something quickly.
And he goes, "Oh, I did, didn't I? Forget. All right." And he just kind of takes in a deep breath, and he slams shut this really thick leather-bound book he appeared to be writing in, and it's got kind of like, you kind of see a glimmer of gold on the cover of the book, but he just kind of grabs it and shoves it under the desk, and he looks at you and Ben, and he goes, "Well, I think I'm about spent, but, you kiddos do a lot. Sorry, Soren, don't worry about the sermon. I'll have freaking Tara do it or whatever."
All right, if you're sure.
All right. And then he kind of puts his hands in his pockets, which his clothes don't necessarily look like they have pockets, but somehow they do. Just, who knows? Lucius is an odd duck. And he looks at you two and he's like, "Well, while you're here, I suppose wouldn't trouble you with some work. The one of the sleeping quarters has a bit of a I don't know what you'd call it, but there's something in there, and I want you guys to go ahead and look into it. It's just that people, when they go in and sleep, they say they hear some weird noise. They describe it as like I don't know, some kind of weird squeaking or whatever. I don't know. Some people say mice. Some people say it's just the building getting old. I need to get the hell out of here, and I hope I can leave this to you two."
Yes, you can indeed, Lucius. We'll take care of it.
All right. And then Ben just nods and he's like, "All right, I'm more than fine with that." And then Lucius goes, "All right, good. Tara," and he kind of snaps his fingers, and you see like a little halfling woman with like kind of short, cropped blonde hair, and like she's wearing the same black clothing as you. And he just goes, "Could you prepare the next sermon or whatever? Because we've got people coming in, and I don't have the patience to deal with anymore." And then Tara's like, "All right, you got it." And she just kind of eagerly darts away, and she just heads off to the hallways, and Lucius just kind of pats you both on the shoulders and walks away, murmuring something to himself, but you don't necessarily understand. But
As he leaves, Soren will call out, "Get some sleep, Lucius. You're looking a little tired, mate."
Lucius nods and just kind of waves, and he's like, "Yeah, no need to tell me twice. Getting a drink first." And he goes ahead and just leaves, and Ben's like, "Well, looks like we've got a bit of problem, don't we?"
Not a problem for much longer. We'll take care of it, no problem.
Fair point. And then he goes ahead and he walks in the direction that Lucius directed you. So kind of providing a better of a lay of the land. in front of you, you see the main chapel wall. It's this rather massive wall with like a steeple top. It's the definitely the tallest wall in the building because from this point, the roof kind of slopes downward and kind of makes the floor for the what you would know to be the attic above. But you see this giant circular stained glass window uh, with patterns of like blue and gold, and the gold and uh, like a kind of a yellowish color go up and make the somewhat colored silhouette of what people believe the goddess Giselle looks like. Just kind of pale face, kind of gentle blue eyes, like this long, uh, curly blonde hair. But that's about all you see of it. And heading to where Ben is going, it's just a little corridor off to the left from that wall that kind of uh, you see it kind of go a little to the left and then it cuts quickly to the right. Do you go ahead and follow Ben into that corridor?
Hmm.
All right. So you go ahead and follow him in, and Ben's just kind of looking around with his hands in his pockets, and he kind of stops and looks into one of the rooms. And as you look up to it, you can go and actually make a quick perception check for me.
Okay. That is going to be a 14.
Perfect. You look inside, and you can see it's almost like the church's library in a way. It houses far more than just scriptures, and you can like taking a glance inside. This isn't a room you've been in a whole lot, but uh, you can see that a lot of the books just kind of scattered about like the various desks and ones that other members of the church are reading. A lot of them have to do with the other gods and just kind of how they practice and everything. And Ben just kind of looks and shakes his head and continues walking down the hall. And he just goes, "You know, I don't know why people insist on studying all the other gods. It seems a bit unnecessary considering what our church is."
The more we know about everyone, the more we can understand our own, considering her position among them.
Screw the others. And he just kind of walks further down the hall, and he lets out a sigh and looks up, and like you kind of look up in the same direction he does. And at the end of this hallway is another stained glass window with a another silhouette of Giselle, though it's kind of from a different angle. It's more like it's kind of like depicting her sitting under a tree playing a harp, and she's surrounded by birds and just various other animals. It's surprisingly intricate for being a stained glass window. And Ben just looks up at it, he smiles and nods, and he goes, "She's the one we should be following, not the others." And he goes ahead and he just kind of clears his throat, and he's like, "Well, let's go ahead and head on in." And he goes and turns into the room at the far left of the corridor. Do you follow?
Yep.
All right. So as soon as you walk in, I want you to go ahead and make a go ahead and make a wisdom saving throw.
Oh boy, oh boy. That is a 15.
Wow, some good rolls here. My goodness. So
New dice.
perfect. So you go ahead and walk in, and as you cross the threshold between the corridor and the room, you kind of feel like a bit lightheaded. Your knees kind of buckle a little bit, and you feel that weird swaying, like as if you haven't had enough like food or water, and you're just kind of like about to faint. But like you see the room get hazy for like just a split second, and then that feeling goes away. And before you, you can see what looks to be just a regular bed chamber uh, that's about like uh, 7 feet by 5 feet. It's not really big, but there are multiple beds on wooden frames, about like three in count, and they're bunk beds, so they're kind of stacked on top of each other. Like this is it's not necessarily meant so much for luxury, so much as it is just members of the church who don't really have any other place to go. And looking in here, Ben just kind of looks around and he goes, "Oh, do you hear anything?" And go ahead and make a quick perception check, and I'll have him do the same.
That is a natural 1.
Oh, geez.
My
And
dice heard you say it was rolling well.
of course, and he rolled a 5, so it's.
Fabulous, fabulous.
So, yeah, he just looks around and he shrugs and he's like, well, I don't hear anything.
Did you feel that when we came in, Ben?
Feel what?
I'll take that as a no. Felt a little bit strange when I walked through the door, but it's gone now.
Huh. And he kind of looks at you and like lifts an eyebrow, and he kind of gets up in your face, and just kind of looks, and he's like, "Have you eaten recently?"
I had my breakfast, the same as all of you.
And he kind of nods, and he's like, "All right, good. Well, in any case," he goes ahead and he turns around. And he goes, "I guess we didn't hear anything, but might as well check to be sure. Go ahead and make an investigation check."
Okay, I'm gonna start looking under the bunks and searching in corners for signs of anything.
Okay, and actually, I
And
go ahead and
that
uh,
is
I was going to say roll with advantage since he'll just be assisting you.
okay. 23.
All right, perfect. So the two of you just kind of looking around and communicating. You're looking for this sound, and finally you hear it. And you kind of stick your head up and uh, you listen for the sound, and you uh, hear it. It's kind of like this. It's less of a squeaking and more of a like a chittering sound.
Where's it coming from?
It's coming from this hole in the upper right corner of the room. It's not super high. Like you could definitely reach it. It's definitely at arm's length for you. So it's not like all the way up, but it's definitely close to the roof.
Okay. Are there any torches or anything lit with a flame in the room?
I will just say, not necessarily in this room because it's got a clear window viewing outside, which I should have mentioned earlier. But yeah, no need for a torch in here.
Okay.
And the hole itself is about it's probably like it's not so much a circle. It's almost kind of cut into a jagged diamond shape, sort of, and it's about 4 inches across on all sides.
Ben, right up there in that corner. Do you hear it?
And he looks up and he goes, "Ah, I do hear it. I call
Doesn't
not
sound
reaching in
like a
there."
mouse. Me? Doesn't sound like a smart idea to me at all. Have you got a stick or something?
I used my last one to make the cool bouquet thing.
I'm gonna look around the room for something that can fit through the hole that I can jab in there.
All right, so just because you rolled such a high investigation, I'll just go ahead and say, uh, so you do go ahead and look around, and you do manage to find a kind of like a rather long, well carved oaken staff that's like has very well shaped edges, and it's very well made. And you find it under one of the beds, and you go ahead and pull that up, and it's about it's about 10 feet long. This is a wide staff.
Okay, I will go ahead and pick that bad boy up, and I'm gonna stick it in the hole.
All right, so you go ahead and poke it through, and as you do, about a foot in, it stops, and you hear that chittering sound go ahead and stop. And Ben
And
kind
I'm
of,
gonna jab it harder.
all right. So you go ahead and jab it harder, and then you don't actually hear anything. It just you don't necessarily hear anything out of place. You just hear it kind of hit the outer wall that this hole leads to.
Well, that's weird.
And Ben just kind of listens, like puts his ear up to the hole, and he's like, "No, I don't hear any anymore." Go ahead and did you impale something on that staff or whatever?
Well, I guess we're gonna find out, and I'll take it out.
All right, so you go ahead and take it out, and you don't necessarily find a body or anything, but you do find the staff kind of covered with this purple-looking dust that's very. It looks almost like glitter in a way, and it's just kind of scattered along the top of this staff.
Can I make an Arcana check to see if I recognize it?
Absolutely, go ahead.
16.
All right, so you do recognize this powder. definitely shouldn't be here, but this actually is what could be considered the quote unquote blood of a creature not from this dimension.
All right. You know what this is, Ben?
He looks at it and he just kind of looks at you, this person's like, no idea.
Well, it seems to me like it's the blood of something not from this dimension. It's a bit of a strange place for it to be hiding in that corner there.
He kind of strokes his chin and he's all, wonder why. Not from this dimension, huh? And he just kind of thinks a little bit and he goes ahead and looks up into the hole like with one eye and is trying to uh like just look at what he can see and he's like and then suddenly he just kind of recoils and falls back and he's like gripping his eye. He's like, what the hell was that?
All right, what have you done now? You're not trying to join me in sightlessness, are you?
And he just kind of laughs and he shakes his head and he's like, no, I was just trying to freak you out. And then he uncovers his eye, but like he does have a bit of the kind of like purple powdery like dust on his eye, interestingly enough.
All right, take care of your eye there, friend. You've got something on there, some of the blood.
All right, I don't see why not. And then he just kind of stretches and he just looks at you and he's like, well, I think I'm about to, I need to run some errands, I suppose. Would you mind?
You're
What?
gonna leave me here, are you?
Unfortunately, so I had some business to take care of, and I should have done so earlier. And I should say, like from your knowledge, he doesn't actually live in the church, so
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Go if you must. I'll take care of this by myself.
All right, sounds good. And don't let old Terra get to you. All right.
Never. Take care, friend. Watch your eye, please.
All right, fairly well. And he goes ahead and walks out of the room, and go ahead and make one more perception check.
Okay. 14.
Oh, perfect. Wow, that was just the DC. You actually hear the chittering again coming from this hole.
Just out of curiosity, I do speak Infernal. By any chance, do I understand what is being said?
Uh, this isn't necessarily infernal. It's actually, let's go ahead and, actually, yeah, with your perception, what you just rolled, I'll go ahead and just say. So, it's not necessarily speaking so much as it is just kind of, it's using sound, more or less, to kind of
Okay.
locate, like, walls around it and trying to figure out where it is.
Okay. Just then, I'm going to run through Celestial and
I'm sorry,
just in.
you cut off there? What was that?
What was that?
Oh, you cut off there. What was that?
Oh, just in case, I'm going to use Infernal and Celestial and ask, "What are you?" Just in case it happens to understand one of those.
All right. Go ahead and make a. We'll go and say persuasion check for this.
Oh, that's not too bad. 16.
All right. Perfect. So you hear the chittering again, and it finally surfaces. Out of this hole walks this rather small rat that kind of like it looks like it should have eyes, but there are no eyeballs in its sockets, and the eyelids are just kind of closed and sunk in, and the fur is kind of gray and matted with spots of purple, and its long tail is a very peculiar shade of blue, and it just kind of it's chittering. And uh, did you do this to also see if you can understand the language?
No, I was just using Infernal and Celestial to see if it would react to either of those.
Okay. So then with that being said, actually go ahead and make an insight check for me.
That is only a 12.
That's still fine. You can tell it didn't necessarily react to what you were saying, but it's more just kind of its coming out of its hiding spot. It's just kind of looking around, and it begins crawling down the wall, and it's like its paws are sticking to the wall, almost like a spider, but it's really not that big. It's only about 3 inches long, and it's just kind of walking around. But then, as it reaches the ground, you hear more chittering coming from inside the hole.
All right, friend. You may have eyes like mine, but you're gonna have to go back into that hole and back wherever you came from. And I'm gonna repeat that in both Celestial and Infernal again, since I still don't know if it understands me.
All right, go ahead and make. Uh, for the sake of what you're trying to do, let's go ahead and make an intimidation check.
Okay. Woo! Whopping 5.
Yeah, no response. This weird gray and purple rat just kind of keeps walking, and it's just kind of looking around at its surroundings, even though it can't see anything. But it is chittering, kind of using echolocation, and you see another one of these rats crawl out of the hole. This one's a little bigger. It's still only 3 inches long, but it's definitely wider, and it begins kind of crawling up the ceiling this time.
Okay. Would I have on me any kind of one of my pouches or something along those lines, do you think?
Yeah, I think we'll assume that you have most everything on you except for your base equipment. So
Okay.
yeah.
Then my component pouch that I have doesn't have a lot of stuff in it right now, but it's fairly sturdy. I'm going to give a mental command to Ias to fly over and try and grab the rat that's on the ground with his talons and come over and drop it into my bag for me, held out.
Ooh, all right. So go ahead and let's make a. I suppose that would be strength check.
All right. Ooh, not too bad. That is a 15.
Oh wow, yeah, no problem. Just swoops down, grabs this rat, and it's kind of squirming around and struggling, and then just there we go, plopped right into your bag.
And then I'll quickly close it up. Might need you to show Lucius later, my friend.
And the bag's just kind of squirming around and still, and like you can hear the chittering of this weird rat, and you can see this rat on the ceiling. It's kind of climbing around, and you notice that it's stopped, and its its face is towards you. Like you can tell, it doesn't necessarily see you, but it's quote unquote looking in your general direction. And
I'm gonna ready a spell.
all right, and it just looks at you and actually go ahead and make an intimidation check with advantage.
And that's a 16.
All right. Yeah. The This weird rat senses a threat and then just immediately runs right back into the hole.
I'm gonna look around for something that I can use to block up the hole.
All right. Go ahead and make an investigation check in that case.
That is a 21.
Oh yeah, no problem. So you continue looking around in the rest of the room, and you do happen to find a few spare pillows under one of the beds, and they're quite thick, and with enough strength, you do manage to go ahead and shove those into the hole, like far enough to where even if those rats kept trying to come in, they would not be able to shove that out.
Alrighty, then I will consider that a job well covered, and I'm gonna go. Whoever I think in the company here might have most knowledge of creatures from alternate planes, and see if I can find them.
All right, so that would be. So actually, yeah, you don't need to make any checks on this because you know the people of this church. So That would be trees. So you go ahead and leave this room, and you go walk back through the corridor, and you go back into the chapel, and you can see that the halfling you saw earlier, the which is the woman named Tara that
Hmm.
both Ben and Lucius have mentioned, just kind of sitting there, writing away in a notepad, and she just kind of see you and waves, and then just kind of looks back down at her notepad and keeps working. And this particular person, Tree, you know exactly where she is. You go to the right of this chapel and head into another corridor that's a lot wider than the last one. This one's about 5 feet across, and you go ahead and walk in, and you look into one of the rooms on the left, and you can see a goblin woman clad in the same like black cloth that everyone else in the church is wearing, and she's just kind of sitting and swaying and just kind of singing unintelligibly to herself. And this is the person that you're essentially looking for. So do you go into the room?
Yeah, I will enter the room and say, "Hey, Tree, I've got a question for you."
And then Trina just kind of stops and looks over at you, and she's like, "Oh, a question! A question! All right." And then she goes ahead and hops off her chair, and she runs over to you, and she's like, "Well, it's good to see you in good health. What did you have a question about?"
Well, Lucius gave me a bit of an assignment earlier. There's a chittering sound in the barracks. Asked us to look into it. I found something a little bit strange. I think it's from another plane.
Hmm. And she sees your pouch, and like she kind of sees the moving about, and she's all right, let's see it.
All right, I caught one of them, but be careful he doesn't get out. I don't know what he is. And then I will really carefully open the bag just a little tiny bit near a light for her.
All right. So and then she goes up and looks at the bag. All right, and she kind of looks in and she sees the rat. And she's like, "Oh, the feisty little one." And she kind of backs away and gestures for you to close the bag. And she goes, "Well, that's definitely not from around here. That's for sure. Uh, are you still carrying the staff you had by chance?"
No, I would have left that in the room,
All
but
right.
I will describe to her the series of events that led to catching the rat, including the dust.
All right. And she just kind of looks at it, and she kind of hears your story, and she goes, "Yes, yes, I see. That would be an Elysium rat, I believe. They come from the fabled land Elysium. Well, not necessarily fabled so much. Whatever. It's called something. I don't know. Lucius knows more about it because all his friends up in the Hoyt Castle have been there. You know, this thing is no threat to us, but the fact that it is here is the dangerous part."
All right, who should I talk to then?
She kind of sits there and thinks for a little bit, and she goes, "Dunno. Let's just wait for Lucius to get back in, and I suppose I'll take care of the thing if you don't mind letting me have it for a little bit."
You're not gonna hurt it, are you?
Mm. Go ahead and make an insight check.
That is a 17.
All right. Yeah, she's she's looking a little hungry. She
Right. I think I better keep it to show Lucius so that he knows that I'm telling the truth. Yes, you see what I mean?
like her smile kind of fades, and she's like, "Yeah, okay, fine, I understand, but be careful with that thing. I don't know what it can do. I know it's not dangerous, but it's not from this plane, and I don't like it."
Right, I'll be careful, I promise.
All right. Well, with that being the case, I'm going to get back to my business, and feel free to do what you want.
All right, thanks for your help.
Yeah, yeah. And she goes back and she kind of sits back down and she continues kind of swaying and singing to herself. And what do you do?
Uh, I suppose then I will be waiting until Lucius comes back, but in the meantime, I am going to attempt to offer the rat some cheese.
All right, go ahead and make an animal handling check.
Oh, 19 on the die plus 2.
Jeez. All right, so you go ahead and offer it some cheese, and it just kind of looks at it, and it's definitely not as skittish as it was when you first got it, and it just kind of starts nibbling away at the cheese, and just happily accepts it.
All right, I'm gonna close the bag up and I'm gonna go find somewhere where I can see Lucius as soon as he returns.
All right. So with that being the case, you go ahead and head back into the chapel, and you just kind of sit there, and you kind of watch everyone work. You see the halfling Tara kind of scolding other members of the church for not getting her drink fast enough or whatever. And then uh, you wait for about an hour or so, and finally hear footsteps behind you, and you turn around, and it's not Lucius, but it is Ben, and he's carrying a actually now you'd see this. He's carrying a dagger in his hands, but it is in a leather scabbard, and he walks up and he looks at you, and he just says, "Did you take care of that problem?"
Well, I think it's gonna be more than a one-person kind of job. I need to talk to Lucius.
Fair enough. I saw him over at Old Savage's pub. If you don't mind, if you just want to go ahead and see him there, I don't think he'll be coming back anytime soon.
Oh Lord, a pub. All right, if I must.
All right. With that being the case, I've got some business to deal with here, so
Right.
I will see you later.
Hey, stay clear of that hole in there, all right? There's things coming from Elysium through it. We want to leave it alone.
And he kind of looks up with like the tilted eye like face, and he just goes, "Elysium?
Hey, that's what Tree said anyway.
Tree? Don't trust goblins." And he just kind of walks off, murmuring to himself, and he heads back to the left corridor that you two entered, and he just kind of
There's
goes off.
always gonna be trouble. All right, I will go ahead and head towards the pub.
All right, so you go ahead and leave the church and enter the commercial district, and go ahead and make an investigation check with advantage.
Fantastic. This fits my character well. 9.
I mean, it's not a really high DC, so you're fine because you haven't really been out of the church much, but you do know the commercial district at least because it's the nearest part of town that you've been in. So you do kind of look around, and it does take you a little bit because it is rather crowded, but you do eventually find your way to this large stone building or stone wall. Stone brick building, my apologies, I couldn't think of the word for some reason. Stone brick building that's about 2 stories long, and all sorts of market stalls are connected to it. But in the middle, you do see a withered wooden sign that says "Old Savages," and you know this well to be the most popular pub in the entire city, and you know this to be a place that our friend Lucius likes to frequent. Do you go in?
I do very, very reluctantly. Pubs are not a place she enjoys. There's too much going on for her Raven to watch at once.
Oh yeah, that definitely makes sense. So you go and walk in, and it has kind of those old school saloon doors that kind of swing open, then kind of the shutter back closed behind you as you walk in. And uh, for it being afternoon, it's not necessarily busy. There are a few people kind of scattered about, sitting at various tables, and you can see the bartender. He's kind of an elderly dwarven man with like a thick gray and white beard and just kind of these surprisingly silver eyes, and he's just kind of sitting there polishing his glass. And you look over towards one of the tables on the left-hand side of the pub, kind of where a wooden staircase leading up is, and you can see Lucius already down 3 wine bottles, and he's drinking these by the bottle. He doesn't even have a glass, and he's just kind of sitting there. His eyes are all in a daze.
Right, this is going to be fun, and I'm gonna go up to him and I'm gonna take the bottle out of his hand
All right.
and say, "Right, Lucius, you need to sober up. We've got a problem."
And as you take the bottle, he kind of jumps up, and he's like, and he looks up and he goes, "Oh, hey! Uh, what are you in here for?"
It's about the assignment you gave me. We're gonna have to step outside into the cold air, see if we can get ahead on you.
And he kind of looks at you, and like his eyes are very much squinted, and his mouth is just kind of open, and he goes, "What assignment?"
The one in the bedroom with the children.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah. He just kind of laughs to himself, and he's like, "All right." And he goes ahead and stands up, and
Oh no.
He puts his hand on the table, but like he puts it on the corner that just so happens to be standing on the loose leg, and he goes ahead and slips and falls to the ground. And
Ugh.
he kind of shakes his head. He looks up and he's like, "Are you okay?"
Oh yeah, I'm fine, Lucius. Let's try and get outside if we can. And I'm going to try and support him a little bit and get him outside into the colder air.
All right, go ahead and make
Uh,
a strength check with a disadvantage because he is not a
oh,
fun
this is
drunk.
great. I'm so glad that I have a 10 strength right now. This will be fine. Oh, and that is a natural 1.
so so you go ahead and lift him up, but like he like his arm just kind of slides right out of your hands, and then Egil Savage, the bartender, kind of runs over and he's like, "Oh, come on!" And he goes ahead. He goes ahead and he just kind of stands up behind Lucius and he's like, "All right, up you go." And he heaves him up, and Lucius kind of gets back up and he's kind of rocking back and forth on his feet, and Egil just kind of supports him, pats his back, and he goes, "You've had enough for one day." And Lucius goes, "But it's so good." And Egil just kind of looks up at you and he goes, "Well, take care of the old man."
All right, I'll try. And then I'll see if I can get him outside now.
All right, so he does kind of hobble a little bit, but he does manage to stay on his feet most of the time as you get outside, and he looks around and he covers his eyes with his hand. And he's like, "It wasn't so bright when I came in."
Yeah, well, you've been having a lot of wine, down ya. Let's sit down over here, take a deep breath or two, try and get your wits about you.
All right, all right, and he just plops down onto the cobblestone streets and kind of takes
Are
he
there other people around at present?
uh just a few, but around this pub, no one seems to care. Like they know people
Okay.
come out drunk all the time. But yeah, people just kind of glance over, and some of them do kind of find it odd that a man in church robes is this heavily drunk, but most of them don't even care. And he just kind of looks up at you and he goes, "So, what's about this assignment?"
All right, what can you tell me about things coming over from Elysium?
And like even in his drunken stupor, his eyes just kind of widen, like you can kind of see his pupils are a little something else, and he he's like, "Elysium, that's a name I haven't heard in a while." And he goes ahead and he kind of rolls back onto his back, and oh wow, he is surprisingly agile for a drunk. He goes ahead and rolls and jumps back up to his feet, like all almost like he's performing some sort of stunt, and he kind of blinks a couple times and rubs his head, and it's like, "Whew. All right, Elysium." And he just kind of burps a little, and he's like, "All right, you know, the king and queen would know a little more about that. Let's go to the castle."
Oh, I don't know that that's a good idea in your current state, friend.
They know me.
Do they know you're a drunkard?
Details. Come on.
Oh,
And he just kind of stumbles, and he's like kind of walking towards the castle, and he's just kind of waving and very awkwardly loud saying hi to everyone.
oh, fabulous. Soren is just skulking behind him, pretending she doesn't actually know him and is just conveniently walking in the same direction.
All right, just for fun, go ahead and make a deception check, actually. Or no, performance. Performance.
Oh, that's fine. This is fine. That is a 3.
Yeah, I mean, you think you're doing a good job making people think you're not associated, but an
Oh,
awful lot of people are looking at you for some weird reason.
uh,
Anyway, you guys go ahead and walk up to the castle, and it looks to be a very traditional castle. It is surrounded by uh, not a very wide moat, but wide enough to where if unwanted intruders were trying to go in, they would not be able to properly cross. But the wooden drawbridge is down, and it just leads straight to this castle that's about 3 stories high, and like it's 50 feet wide. This is a pretty big castle. You go and walk in, And, Lucius walks up to one of the Crown's Guard, and they're kind of wearing these iron chest plates and helms, and they've got this kind of this blue, I don't know what you'd call it, but like a almost like a shawl over their armor, but like there's it doesn't cover their arms; it just covers the front and back, and it's got like the royal family emblem, which is like this shield with like a sword and a lion on it, and Lucius kind of leans up against one of the guards and puts his shoulders or his hands on one of
Oh,
their shoulders, and thankfully the guard just kind of shrugs him off and he's like, "Lucius, you all right?" It's just it's this human man with kind of long brown hair and like brown bushy beard, and Lucius is like, "Yeah, just." He kind of takes in a deep breath. The other guard is this female half elf wearing the same clothing, and she's got like this rather long blonde hair pulled back into a ponytail, and she goes, "He's not fine. We need to get him some water or something." And she looks at you and she goes, "Were you a friend of him?"
he's 3 bottles of wine in. We need to speak with the king and queen. I'm afraid it is actually of some importance, and this old rust bucket drug me up here.
And Lucius is like, "Right, king and queen." And he walks into the castle, and the guards just kind of watch him, and they don't even try to stop him. But do you go ahead and follow?
Yeah, I
uh,
will.
all right, you go ahead and follow. And as soon as you walk into this castle, the foyer area is not exactly big because it immediately kind of breaks off into corridors heading into different parts of the castle, but the entire castle is open air. Like all the windows that are carved into the brick walls have no glass panes on them or anything, and they just kind of let the breeze in, and it feels really nice considering the time of day and like the nice shade in the castle. And Lucius, like you kind of see Lucius stumbling uh, down his uh, rapid footsteps, kind of clanking against the marble floor, and uh, he heads towards the rightmost corridor and into a rather modest-looking redwood door. And do you go and follow?
I do, and I am, just to clarify, standing close enough to him that if he looks like he's gonna stumble or maybe touch something he's not supposed to touch, I can try and stop him.
All right, perfect. So you go ahead and follow him into this room, and you come into a room that's about, uh, it's a square-shaped room, like 7 by 7, and inside there are 4 thrones, and they've all got red leather uh, cushioning over like wooden frames, and only 2 of the thrones are filled in. One is by a woman with long black hair, and she's kind of got like this pale complexion. She's got bright blue eyes, and she's wearing this very elegant white dress without sleeves on it. And on the second throne, you don't see like you don't see the king, but you see a squirrel sitting there. He's just kind of pacing back and forth, but he's on 2 feet, not four, and he's kind of walking like a human, and he's kind of tapping his chin with his hand. And the black-haired woman, she sees Lucius stumble into the room, and he's like, "Guess who's here?" And he kind of
Oh,
he kind of stumbles, and the black-haired woman, you know this to be the queen. This is Queen Lenora Moranthia. She kind of runs off the throne and grabs him and stops him from falling. Like, and she does it surprisingly fast. Like, she's probably in her mid 30s by this point, but she definitely moves fast. And she kind of lifts Lucius up and kind of throws one arm over her shoulders and lifts him up. And she's like, "All right, buddy, let's go ahead and get you to rest." And Lucius is like,
Soren is just mouthing, I'm so sorry, just over and over behind this.
and the queen goes ahead and sets Lucius down on one of the empty thrones, and she turns towards you and she goes, "Oh, don't worry, he does this all the time." And she goes, and then she kind of looks at you and she goes, "I don't believe I've met you before. What's your name?"
My name is Soren, Your Highness.
"Ah, well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Soren. I'm assuming you're a friend of our drunk friend here, considering you both came in."
I work at the church with him for Giselle.
And then you suddenly hear this voice go, "The church just sell," and you look over and you see the squirrel beginning to speak. And um, he hops off the chair and kind of crawls up Lenora's back, and he's kind of perched on her shoulder like a parrot. And he looks at you and he goes, "What's with the crow?" And then Lenora's like, "Raven. It's
Uh, Ias, by the way, when this squirrel comes and sits on Lenora's shoulder, kind of leans in with one eye, just looking at this squirrel with so much confusion.
And the squirrel just goes, "Oh, right. Name's Diedrich. The family favorite." And Lenora just kind of smacks him off her shoulder and he goes flying. And she goes, "My apologies. Diedrich, he's the king's pet, and the king sadly hasn't been here very frequently, but he gets a little stir crazy, and he goes, I should have gone drinking with Lucius." And Lucius is like, "I'll invite you next time." And then the queen looks at you and goes, "Well, why have you both come in here?"
I'm sorry to intrude without warning, but we've got a little something that you might be able to help with. I found this creature in the church. Seems that maybe it might have come over from Elysium.
And she just kind of stops, and she's like, "Elysium? Huh. Alright, mind if I take a look?"
Oh, sure. I'd prefer not to hurt it if possible. It doesn't seem to be particularly aggressive or anything.
And she just kind of waves her hand. She's like, "Oh, no, no, don't worry. The king's the aggressive one, and so's that squirrel over there." And then you hear Diedrich go, "I'll eat it if I have to." And,
I will go ahead and hand her the bag.
all right, so you go ahead and hand her the bag, and she pulls it open, and she just kind of lets out a bit of a gasp as she sees this rat, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen one of these in forever." And she lifts it up, and she just kind of holds it in her hand, like very gently, and like it's kind of scurrying up her arm and kind of perches on her shoulder. And then Deidre's like, "Hey, that's my place." And then uh, and then Lenora is just kind of petting the back of this rat's head with her finger, and she goes, "Oh, this little thing, it means no harm. It runs across her back and to her other shoulder, and she's just kind of watching it as it does, and she goes, "Yeah, this is definitely from Elysium, but it's a peaceful creature. You could probably keep it as a pet if you wanted to." But she goes ahead and lifts it off and kind of puts it in the bag, and she goes, "But the question as to is why it came. Uh, where did you find this thing?"
There was a little hole in the barracks. People were complaining about a sound. They thought it was mice or rats. We went to investigate, and well, this is what I found. This and another one too, but I sent it back inside the hole and plugged it up.
And she just kind of nods, and she looks at Lucius, who's still kind of in a drunken stupor, and Diedrich has now just kind of run over to Lucius and is just kind of slapping him with his little paws and like trying to see if Lucius notices, but from what you can see, he doesn't. And Lenore's like, "Do you mind taking me to where you found this?"
Not at all, Your Majesty. If you'll just follow me when you're ready.
All right, sure. And then she goes ahead and lifts Lucius back up, and this time she straight up just carries him like he's nothing, and he's like his eyes start closing and he's beginning to fall asleep a little, and then Diedrich kind of runs up to her shoulder and she's like, "All right, I'm ready when you are."
All right, this is totally normal, and then I'm gonna go ahead and walk back to the church.
All right, so you go and head back to the
Totally
church
not being followed by a queen carrying the priest. It's totally kind of normal.
with a squirrel on her shoulder, no less.
Nothing weird going on at all.
So surprisingly, this is actually a normal sight in this city because not only do the king and queen like to kind of mingle among the public, but Diedrich is well known. Go and actually make a history check for me.
That is a 19.
Oh yeah, you know. Diedrich is actually the leader of the kingdom's military.
Okay.
So, like, pretty much everyone in this town and many of the villages surrounding it definitely know his name, and they know that he is a powerful freaking squirrel.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
and so you just you go and head back into the church, And as you do, you notice that the chapel has kind of filled up rather quickly, and you just kind of based on your knowledge of how things go. This is probably just the afternoon sermon that the halfling Tara is delivering, and Tree is just kind of sitting behind her with her legs crossed and her arms crossed, and she's just kind of glaring at everyone sitting there. And she sees you and kind of scowls even more and turns away, and she's still angry for not letting you eat the rat. But with that, everyone, like all heads kind of turn, and thankfully Lucius has passed out at this point, so we can't like call a bunch of attention to himself. But he is snoring kind of loud, and a lot of the people here for their church service kind of turn and look, uh, and Tara just kind of waves her hands, and she goes, "No, no, don't worry about it. Just pay attention if you want to learn anything." And and then Tree just kind of snarls at everyone, and like everyone just kind of quickly snaps back forward and starts. They continue paying attention to the sermon, and you go ahead and lead Lenora into the room where you uh, found this weird hole, and go ahead and make another wisdom saving throw as you go ahead and enter this room.
That is going to be a 17.
Man. So you
Luckily,
go
that's one of my proficiencies. So.
exactly. So yeah, you're more than good there. So you go ahead and walk across the threshold, and you feel that same weird fuzziness and lightheadedness you felt the last time you came in here. And you see the room kind of go blurry for a second, and then after a second, it just disappears. You look into the corner, and that pillow's still stuffed in there.
Right, Your Majesty, I don't know if this would mean anything, but the last 2 times I've come through this room, I felt almost dizzy and the room got a little bit dark.
And as you're saying this, you don't actually hear anything.
So my mouth is moving and nothing's happening?
Oh no, like you don't hear her responding or anything. Like you're actually speaking, but you don't hear her respond or anything. You don't even hear her like moving.
Do I see her?
You go ahead and turn around, and you look, and she is still behind you, and she's still holding Lucius, and she has Diedrich at her shoulder, but she's just kind of standing there with this, like, her eyes are all wide, and her mouth's agape, and she's not moving, and as far as you can tell, not breathing either. She's just kind of standing there paralyzed.
I'm gonna go pinch her arm.
Alright, you pinch it, but as soon as your fingers touch her skin, she, Lucius, and Diedrich all disappear.
Oh, perfect. This is fine. Oh, that's not ideal at all, is it? Hello? Oh, shite. Do I see anything out of the ordinary?
Go
Anything different?
Go ahead and make a perception check.
That is only a 10.
Alright, so looking around, you don't necessarily see anything different about the room. The pillow's still stuffed in there. Everything appears to be the same until you look at one of the nightstands. One of the drawers has been pulled slightly open.
Oh, that's weird, and I'm gonna go look and see what's in the drawer.
Alright, you go ahead and pull it. You go ahead and pull it open, and nothing's in there. You just see a little twig.
A twig, eh? Wonder which of my friends happens to use twigs sometimes. Ben, are you in here? Ben?
As you speak, nothing.
Alright, I'm gonna go take that pillow out of the hole.
Alright. So as soon as you do, it's almost way too easy. As soon as you pull it open, you actually see this army of those rats come flooding out of this hole. And as if they've been trying to struggle to get out of this. And they're scattering all around the room. And you hear the chittering all over from all sides. And you look into this hole, and you can see a purple light kind of pulsating. And you hear a gentle hum like...
I'm gonna try and shove the pillow back into the hole as quickly as I can.
Alright. Easy enough. You go ahead and shove the pillow back into the hole, but then something pulls the pillow all the way through the hole, and you can no longer see it.
Oh, she just kind of in that panic state where you're just a stream of curse words are coming out of your mouth and you're turning left and right repeatedly even though you have no reason to look either direction, just trying to figure out what to do while having absolutely no idea what to do. Just total panic.
All right, and as you're panicking, you hear the sound of running footsteps coming in from the corridor, and as you look at the door, you can see both Tara and Tree, and they're looking at you, and they're just kind of looking around, and they look at the room all panicked, and Tree's like, "What the hell is this?" And and Tara's like, What's going on?"
Right, we've got a bit of a problem. The queen, she stepped through the door and then she wasn't reacting to anything. I pinched her arm and I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that, but anyway, she wasn't reacting. And then all of a sudden, when I touched her, they all of them, they disappeared. And then so I looked in the drawer over here and there was a stick, but I don't see Ben anywhere. He likes sticks. And then I went to the pillow and I pulled the pillow out of the wall. But then all these rats just started pouring out of the wall, and then I stuffed the pillow back in, and then something pulled it all the way in, and can you see that purple light?
All right, so the entire time you're telling this story, Tara is just kind of like, she's kind of gesturing with her hands, trying to get you to slow down, but she's still trying to listen to every word. And then Tree just marches on in and grabs one of the rats and bites his head right off. And you see this kind of purple glowing dust come out of the rat, and like it just like its tail is still squirming a little bit and twitching, and she's kind of chewing away. And then Tree goes in, or my apologies, not Tree, Tara, she goes ahead and starts heading towards the door, and she goes, what, purple? And as soon as she walks through, you see her suddenly, her face sinks, her eyes go wide, and her mouth goes agape. And she is frozen, right, just like Lenore was.
Now watch this, and I'm going to go over and I'm going to poke Tara.
Alright, so you go ahead and poke her, and she disappears just like Lenore did. And Tree's looking, and she's still chewing on this rat's head, and she like, the head just falls out, but it's like it's just the snout, and she is like swallowed.
Right. See, I told you the queen was here, and then the same thing happened.
What the fuck? And then she kind of throws the rat corpse down, and she's looking around. Where was the purple light you mentioned?
It's here in the room, but I think if you step through the door, the same thing might happen to you.
Oh, she's already in the room. That's how she grabbed one of the rats.
She already is. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
So she's
point it out then.
Yeah. Okay. She succeeded the saving throw, and so you go ahead and point out the glow, and she's very short. She's about up to your like up to your sides. She's not that tall. So she does see the glow though, and like she kind of backs off, and her eyes are wide, and she's like, "Easy, man." And then she looks around at the rats, and she's just freaking out. She says, "You mentioned something about pillow, right?"
Right. I used it to plug the hole when I found the first rat, and that's when I went to see the royals. But when I came back, I stuffed the pillow back in because of all the rats trying to come back out, and then something pulled it into the hole.
And she's nodding as you're listening to the story, and she's like, "Yeah, that's real weird. Alright, let's go ahead and let's talk to Lucius and see what we can do about this." And she goes ahead and just...
Right, yeah, you can't do that because he's kind of gone too.
She doesn't even hear you. She goes ahead and marches right out of the room.
Oh, Tree, oh god, this is a mess. Alright, she's gonna go over to the hole and like try and look through it and see if she can see anything in the light.
Alright, go ahead and make an investigation check.
That is a 12.
Alright, so you're looking into this light, and it's quite bright, but I mean, considering that you're looking through your familiar, it doesn't really bother you. But you're looking through it for a second, and more of these rats are still crawling out, but then from the other side, you very briefly see a glowing red eye blink, and then it just disappears.
Hello? Can you hear me?
And as you speak, just no response. You don't hear anything else.
Oh, Christ. What am I doing? This is insane. I'm gonna stick my arm in the hole.
Alright. You go ahead and stick your arm into the hole, and you kind of your hand kind of feels a bit of the weird powdery substance that have been coming from these rats, but yeah. So far, other than that, nothing else really. You just kind of feel a kind of a cold breeze coming in from this weird glow, and that's about it.
All right. There's no. It's still just the chittering from the rats. There's no other sounds coming
Uh,
through.
Other than that, it's the chittering sounds, and then you also kind of hear the pulsing light, and that's about
Okay.
it.
Uh, I'm going to go ahead then and follow Tree, and if there is a door to be closed behind me, I will close it.
All right, easy enough. You go ahead and walk out into the hallway. You close the door, and as soon as you turn and look into the hallway, and what normally would be the corridor leading to the chapel is just a wall. It's a straight dead end.
All right, fantastic. This just keeps getting better and better, doesn't it? So do I have any other options to exit the area?
Uh, I mean, yeah, easy enough. You don't even have to make a check. You actually turn around and you do see the corridor behind you, and instead of curving to the left like it normally would, it curves off to the right.
All right, this is fine. Did I have any of that wine? I don't remember now. She's gonna go ahead and make her way very, very cautiously along the hallway.
All right, go ahead and make a stealth check.
Thanks.
So you are walking and being as cautious as you feel you can be, and but you walk out into the corridor, and as you turn the hall, you it leads into what appears to be the chapel, but for some reason it's been flipped around. All the chairs have been knocked down. The window, the stained glass window of Giselle, has been shattered, and outside is just pitch black. You don't see anything.
Oh, great. Do I see anybody at all?
Go ahead and make a quick investigation check.
Oh, ooh, that is 25.
Oh, oh yeah. So as you enter this chapel, you do hear a couple familiar voices. You can hear Tree kind of speaking. She's speaking very loudly, and she's definitely swearing quite a bit. And you hear kind of a calm male voice, and it's over on the far end of the chapel, kind of where you are, where what usually is the right of the chapel, it's now the left. Do you go ahead and look for those voices?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And as I'm going, I'm going to call out to Tree, can you hear me?
All right, and as you're calling out, you do hear the voices stop, and Tree's like, "Yeah, I can hear you. Come here, come here." And then,
Fine.
all right, so you go ahead and walk into the corridor, and it's so bizarre being in what is essentially a flipped version of the church, because you go ahead and try to turn to the right, but it's just a straight up wall, and you nearly just bump into it. And then you go ahead and turn back around, and you enter the room that you found her in earlier, where she was just kind of singing there and swaying, and she's standing there, and in front of you, you see Lucius. He's he's writing something down on a notebook, and he's just kind of uh, sitting behind a desk. And Tree looks up at you, and she goes, "I think he might know a little something about what's going on, but he won't listen to me."
Lucius, can you hear me?
Lucius is, he's kind of writing, and he just kind of goes, hmm. He doesn't even look up. He's just like, yeah, I can hear you. And he seems perfectly sober now. He doesn't look at all drunk.
Lucius, would I be right in thinking there's something going on with Elysium here?
And he stops writing for a little bit, and he's like, Elysium. Where have I heard that name before? And then,
Oh, Lord.
and then Tree just goes, "You fucking don't! You know what Elysium is!" And Lucius goes, "Don't swear in the church." And he just keeps writing.
Tree, I don't think he knows what's going on.
I don't know what's going on either. And she just kind of grumbles, and finally, you see Lucius you hear his pen scratching really hard across the page multiple times as though he's crossing a bunch of things out. And you even hear the page like kind of tear a little as he's doing so. And he slams the book shut really loud and throws the book across the room and stands up to his feet. And he just bolts out of the room, kind of shoving into both you and Tree as he just disappears into the corridor.
Well, I gotta follow him.
And Tree's like, yeah, something doesn't seem right. And she goes ahead and runs out of the room. Do you go ahead and follow after her?
Oh yeah.
All right, go ahead and make a wisdom saving throw.
Oh god. Natural 1.
Oh boy. So as you go ahead and cross through the door, like you initially saw the corridor behind you, but as soon as your foot like crosses the threshold, suddenly the entire church just goes dark, and you're in this complete pitch black, just empty void.
I'm gonna create a bonfire.
All right, so you go ahead and create that bonfire, and you do see the light of it, but around you, you don't see anything else. It doesn't illuminate anything. You're just in this black void.
Hello, is anyone there? Can you hear me?
And your voice doesn't even so much as echo. You just make this declaration, but then you do hear footsteps. They're very rapid footsteps, kind of almost as though they're heavy boots on a marble floor. And they're kind of getting louder, but then they start getting softer again. And then just kind of disappear into the darkness towards where you're facing, kind of to the directly ahead of you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead then and continue along that way. And every time I run out of light from the bonfire, I'll create a new one in front of me so that my way is lit, just in case.
All right, sure, and easy enough. You go ahead and do exactly that. And the more you start running, the more like you start seeing the flames kind of illuminate parts of a wall, and you keep running and you keep creating these bonfires, and then finally you find yourself back in the church, and you're running through this corridor, and as soon as you do, you kind of bump right into a familiar face, and you see in front of you Ben. He's standing there, and as soon as you bump into him, he kind of turns around and goes, "Hey, Soren, what are you doing?"
What am I doing? What are you doing? Where the hell are we?
He kind of looks at you, and he's like, "I know what you're talking about. We're in the church."
What? You don't see all this darkness around?
He kind of looks around, and he shrugs, and he's like, "I mean, it's evening, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was dark, but I don't know what you're talking about. You all right? You don't seem yourself."
Ben, what were you doing with the dagger earlier?
"The dagger? What dagger?"
The dagger that you walked into the church with earlier. I saw you.
And he just he fully turns around, and you see that he is now holding a leather-bound book that you immediately recognize to be the Scriptures of Giselle, and he just kind of lifts an eyebrow, and he's like, "I don't recall bringing a dagger in today. Soren, are you sure you're okay? I think you need some rest."
No, there's something that's not okay, all right, but it's not with me. And I'm going to go ahead and leave him because Soren does not believe this is the real Ben.
All right. That makes sense. So you go ahead and this corridor is just a straight shot. It's just heading forward, and the further you head, the more illuminated the path is, and it seems to be going on a lot longer than regular corridors in the church normally do. But finally, you do make your way back to the chapel, and it has been turned around again, but it's facing the correct direction this time. But all the chairs are still overturned, and this time, you don't see anyone in the chapel. You just see the church, the window, which is still shattered, and you can only still see just the pitch black darkness inside there. And go ahead and make a dexterity saving throw.
Natural 20.
Nice. So you just you're with your nerves high and you can already feel something's wrong. You hear something kind of going, and you quickly back out of the way, and you see a crossbow bolt fire right past you. You turn around, and you don't see anything behind you. You just see this straight blank brick wall where the door to the church usually is, but now it's just wall. There's no door there.
I'm gonna lob a firebolt in the direction that the arrow came from.
All right. With that being the case, go ahead and roll attack.
That is a 14.
Perfect. That hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
10.
Ooh, nice. So you go ahead and throw this firebolt, and you see it land on the wall, and suddenly the flames kind of envelop this invisible frame, and you hear this squealing, like you see the faint silhouette of a kobold armed with a crossbow, and it just burns to ashes.
Oh, right, that's not normal at all. And then I'm gonna try and get back down to where I lost the queen in the church, but in this whatever world I'm in now.
All right, so with that being the case, with the church kind of back in its usual alignment, you go ahead and head back into that room in which Lenora disappeared, and you walk into the bedchambers, and you look, and there's no longer a hole there, but the entire room is covered in this purple dust material, and the beds are messy, the mattresses are kind of torn, but there are just members of the church sitting there just kind of talking and having casual conversations.
Right, this is gonna sound like a weird question, but have any of you seen a queen?
And everyone just kind of looks up at you, and none of them answer. They just kind of go back to their conversations. And then suddenly you hear another crossbow bolt sticks right through one of the church members' heads, and they just fall to the ground, but none of the other church members even seem to notice.
Lob another firebolt in the direction.
All right, go ahead and roll attack.
14.
All right, that definitely hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
2.
So you go ahead and throw this, but the flame just kind of catches the corner of the door, and only a little bit kind of escapes out. And you see the little bit of flame that escaped go ahead and hit the invisible cloth of this kobold, and it just kind of screeches, and you hear its clawed footsteps kind of running off back down the corridor.
I'm gonna try and follow it.
All right, you go ahead and head outside the corridor. Go ahead and make a perception check.
Natural 20.
Nice. So even though this thing is mostly or pretty much entirely invisible, you still see, like, you can kind of see the burnt piece of cloth kind of dangling there as he's running. And you see he's not far ahead of you. He is going to try to head into the chapel, but he's still right there. What would you like to do?
I'm gonna run as fast as I can and try and tackle the little hooker.
All right, go ahead, and since you're going to go ahead and try to do that, just make a strength check here. Oh.
Oh, thank God, it's a good roll. 18.
Oh yeah, that's more than fine. He rolled an 8. So you go ahead and you run up to him, and just because of your keen senses through your familiar, you go ahead and find this figure, and you tackle it to the ground, and the invisibility is kind of right off it, and he's just kind of struggling, and he's like kind of pounding his fists against the ground, and he tries to like aim his crossbow at you while you haven't tackled, but like his arm just can't quite reach.
Who the hell are you? Why are you here? Where are we?
And he's just kind of squealing, and he's like, "Don't know. Get off!"
Why are you attacking us? Me?
And then suddenly, this kobold just kind of stops squirming and kind of looks directly in your eyes, and in almost perfect common goes, "Attack you? Us? I don't know what you mean."
I dodged one of your crossbow bolts just a moment ago and flamed your little friend into oblivion for it.
But while you're saying this, you look over and the crossbow is no longer there. And he kind of holds his hands out and he's like, he looks genuinely confused. He's like, I have no business with human people.
Where are we?
And he just kind of shakes his head and he's like, don't know.
What are you doing here then? How'd you get here?
And he he points over towards the corridor you just went through and he's like, bedroom, crossed through, suddenly see darkness, and then I'm here.
That's just like me, except for in a different room. And the queen, too.
And the kobold's kind of struggling. He's like, get off, please.
Since you asked nicely, and then she'll go ahead and get up.
All right, and as you do, he gets back up, and he is very shaky. And you look at the cloth that was burning earlier, and you see it's good as new, and there's no burn marks. It's no longer burned, and he's just looking around. And as soon as he's up, he goes ahead and runs over, and oh shit, he gets on one foot, jumps up, and kind of does like this front-facing cartwheel over the broken window, jumps into the void, but as soon as he does, you kind of see him just disintegrate.
What the actual fuck?
And then, as you're watching this happen, you hear footsteps running up towards you, and you just hear, Soren! And as you turn around, you can see Ben coming up towards you, and he's still holding the scriptures, and he's got Lucius behind him, who's still looking perfectly normal. And Ben just looks at you and he goes, I think I know what you mean. I don't know, but something seems off.
Yeah, just about everything does.
And Lucius looks around and he goes, I don't know. Things seem pretty normal to me.
You're all mad. Or I am. Either way.
And Ben just kind of, he's flipping through the scriptures of Giselle and he goes, well, what should we do now? I haven't seen anything like this happen before.
Well, to be perfectly honest, I don't trust at present time that either of you two are even real.
And both of them just kind of look up at you, and Lucius is like, you pose an interesting philosophy. Is any of this real? And Ben just kind of slaps his chest with the back of his hand, and he goes, but why? What makes you think that?
Well, so far, everything that I've been seeing is changing left and right around me. I think something's there, and then it's not. And then nobody has any idea what I'm talking about except for me. But something's not right, and I can't trust anything.
And Lucius kind of nods, and he's like, I see. Ben, would you mind fixing that window? And then Ben's like, yeah, later. But anyway, and he looks at you and he goes, I know what you mean. You're talking about whatever happened in that room with the hole, aren't you?
Aye?
And he nods and he just slams the scriptures shut, and he looks up at Lucius and he's like, I'll worry about the windows later, okay? Soren and I, we need to go look at something. And Lucius is like, all right, fine. I'll be in my office, though, if either we need anything. And he goes ahead and walks off with his hands behind his back. And Ben looks up at the shattered window, and he's like, did a kobold disintegrate up there?
Aye, it did. Moments after, the crossbow that it shot one of our friends with disintegrated in its hands, and it seemed to know nothing about it.
I see. And he just looks into the corridor where that room was, and he goes ahead and begins walking towards it, and he's like, come on, I think I may have an idea of what's going on. Do you follow?
I will follow him, but very hesitantly and not close behind him.
All right, fair enough. So he goes ahead and he heads back down the corridor and back into the room that he visited so many times. And he walks in and he kind of kneels down, opens up the dresser, and do you go into the room with him or do you stay outside of it?
I'm gonna stay just outside the door for now.
All right. So looking inside, you actually see that the members of the church who are all in here, all of them have now collapsed on the bed, and all of them have crossbow bolts just through the temples of their head, and they have just been bleeding out. But interestingly, it's not regular blood. It's the same purple dust you've been seeing in this room, and it's just kind of gently pouring out from their wounds. And
All right, Ben, can you see any of this?
Ben looks around and he's like, yes. But he doesn't really say anything else. He just kind of goes back searching through the drawer you saw earlier. And interestingly enough, there's a lot more in that drawer than you remember there being. And he goes ahead and pulls out the twig you saw earlier. And as he holds it in his hand, it kind of grows out to be a short sword. And he looks at you and he's like, where did the hole go?
I don't know.
And he looks up to where it once was, goes ahead and kind of tries stabbing it with a short sword, and then just kind of bounces off the wall. And he goes, "Well, this is a lot stranger than I thought. Come with me. There's somewhere else I'd like to investigate." And he goes ahead and walks right back out the door. And you watch him. He goes ahead and walks straight forward through the corridor, and what looks to be solid wall, he just suddenly phases right through and disappears into the wall.
I'm gonna follow him.
All right.
Through the stone wall.
So you go ahead and you head into the wall, but like as you get closer, you see the wall beginning to fade away, and it just leads into this arched stone doorway. And ahead of you is a stone staircase just leading further down. But as far as you could see, it's just darkness inside. Although you do see the faint light of torchlight at the bottom. Do you go ahead and follow him?
Is that wall that I just walked through one that's normally in the church?
Yeah, that is one that's normally in the church, and it just kind of faded away.
Yes, I will follow him.
All right, you go ahead and follow him down into this strange staircase, and as you go down, it starts getting a little colder, and you look at Ben, and he's already walking on the ground at the bottom of the staircase. And as you go ahead and make that last step, go ahead and make a wisdom saving throw.
Natural 20.
Nice. So you go ahead and walk across, and you do feel that weird dizzy feeling, but it doesn't even last a second this time. It's just there for an instant, and then it's suddenly gone. And before you, you see this kind of an underground bunker of sorts. At the end of this long corridor is this large rectangular room with all sorts of bed sets, and then up at the far end of this bunker is another rounded or another arched doorway, and Ben is heading right towards it. So now that you're in this bunker, though, what would you like to do?
Try and catch up to him. Ben, where the hell are we? What is this place?
And he just kind of laughs, and he's like, "It's a secret. Even the people in even freaking Lucius has no idea this is here." And
you do. Why do you?
and Lucius just kind of smiles, and he's like, "Well, like I said, I like to keep my secrets to myself." And he just keeps going down this strange corridor.
I will follow him with a bit of a irritated look on my face.
So you go ahead and follow him into this corridor, and at the end of it, there's this rectangular door. Interestingly enough, it's actually made of steel with iron bolts kind of lining the edges. He goes ahead and pushes it open, and it kind of squeals open. It hasn't been open in a very long time. And he walks in, and as you follow, you come into a much smaller room. This one's probably about 5 feet by 5 feet, but it is surprisingly tall. It's about 20 feet tall from what you can tell. And inside this room looks to be some sort of office. There's a wooden desk with just a normal chair behind it. There's a bookshelf to your left, although surprisingly, only the only books on there are the exact same copies of the Scriptures of Giselle. Like, not even different variations, they're just the exact same copy. And Ben just kind of sits down in the chair and he's studying the one he has in hand, and he's just looking there and he's like, I see, I see. And he's just sitting there reading. So while he's doing so, what would you like to do?
Uh, more of the irritated expression on my face. I'll say, would you care to explain a little bit of what's going on?
And he's like, yeah, hold on. And he kind of holds his finger up and he's reading a certain passage very fervently, and he has his like fingers over the words, and he kind of takes a moment. And he's like, uh, all right, I understand now. And he closes the book and kind of puts it into this empty spot on the bookshelf. And he's like, someone within the church has done this, and I don't know exactly who, but whomever they are, they have malevolent intent. And he kind of gestures towards the bunker, and he's like, the reason I know this is here is because only one particular scripture of Giselle describes this happening. This is something that's done by false followers, false believers. They have powers in this world, and as far as what world this is, I'm not sure. This is not Elysium from the knowledge that I've read on it, but it's something else, and we are in danger if we don't figure out what in the world is going on soon. So with that being the case, and he goes ahead and he keeps walking, and you can kind of see his grip around the hilt of the short sword tightening, and he's like, I think we need to take care of whoever's done this.
You mean we need to find that person here in this fake church?
And he nods, and he's like, exactly. Just because the church is fake doesn't necessarily mean that the people here are. So let's go ahead and take a look around. I will meet you back up at the top of the church. And,
Quick
what?
question. Do you think there's any fallback if we were to just kill everyone we see?
And he kind of looks at you. Uh, at first, he kind of looks astonished, and then he kind of grins, and he's like, I like the way you think. And he's like, I don't think there is. Well then, let's go ahead and get this mission started, shall we? And he goes ahead and starts heading back up to the top of the church. Do you follow?
Okay, I will follow.
All right.
Fireballs ready in hand.
All right, so as you go ahead and follow him, you cross that threshold to the stairs again, although you don't feel that fuzziness anymore, so thankfully nothing strange happens. You go ahead and head back up to the the ground floor rather, of this church, and you can see inside that Ben is questioning a human male member of the church, and you don't necessarily hear what they're talking about because they're at the far end of the chapel, but the man that he's asking questions about doesn't give him an answer he likes, apparently, and Ben goes in and runs the sword right through him, and he looks up and sees you as you're walking up, and he looks back down at the man, and he kind of walks towards you, and he's like, well, I checked him, and maybe these people really are fake. I Go ahead and get close, and you can see for yourself. Do you go ahead and look at go to look at the man he just killed?
Yeah, I'll get a much closer look.
All right. So as you go ahead and get a closer look, go ahead and make an Arcana check.
Okay. That is a 16.
All right. So as you're looking at this corpse, you just see the just this bloody figure of this man of the church, and you recognize him. His name was actually Bralia, and it's someone you didn't really know well, but he was definitely part of Tree's Council of all people. But as you look at him, you can kind of see his figure just kind of starting to become a little transparent, and through the transparency, you can see this pure black creature with just very, very thin limbs and these bright red eyes. And their eyes were glowing for a moment, but as this figure is dying from this blow. The glow just slowly disappears.
Right, I definitely think we should kill anyone we run into then.
And Ben just kind of nods, and his face is kind of solemn, and he's like, "See, I told you." And right as he's saying this, you hear more footsteps, and you can see uh, over in the distance a tree running up to you, and she's all, "What? What's going on? What did you
Right,
do?"
sorry about this, and I'm gonna lob a firebolt at her.
All right, go ahead and roll attack.
That is a 16.
That definitely hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
4 points of fire damage.
All right, not bad. So you go ahead and lob this firebolt over the tree, and it lands right on top of her and just envelops her entire body, and she's kind of squirming, kind of like clawing at her face, and she's screaming. And Ben will run over with his sword, and he's going to go ahead and make an attack. That definitely hits. And then let's see here. All right. He goes ahead and runs the short sword right through her, and she just screams out this chilling scream, and then her body just kind of crumples and just becomes this charred corpse. And you look at it, and you can see the body kind of fading in and out, and you can see that strange black demonic form that you saw in the corpse of the other body. And as soon as whatever this thing pretending to be a tree was falls, you look outside, and in the void, you can kind of see this flash, and for an instant, you can see regular blue sky, but then it quickly flashes back to the dark void.
I think whatever we're doing is working. We'd better keep doing it.
Ben nods, and he's like, "Yes, I agree. In any case, I'll go ahead and take the left wing. Go ahead and take the right, all right?"
All right.
All right. So, with that being said, he goes ahead and darts off to the left corridor, and do you go ahead and follow his order?
Yes, I do.
All right, you go ahead and run into the right corridor, and let's see here. All right, go ahead and make another dexterity saving throw.
18.
Ooh, just barely. So
Oh, man.
as you're running through this corridor, you can you sense a presence right behind the corner, and you just see this massive club come swinging at you, and you quickly just dodge right out of the way. And behind this corridor, you can see a kobold standing there with a club, and he is just staring straight at you. Go ahead and roll initiative for me.
Okay. That is only a 9.
That's totally fine, because this poor thing rolled a 1. So with that being the case, he gets to go ahead and go first, and he is about 7 feet away from you. He's really not far, but his club does have quite a bit of a reach. So what do you do?
I'm gonna light a bonfire underneath him.
Nice.
He needs to make a dexterity saving throw.
All right, dexterity saving throw. That is a 14.
And that just barely saves. So
Oh.
okay.
All right, see, as soon as you go ahead and create this bonfire, he goes ahead and sees this happening, and like right as he does, he just kind of quickly jumps right out of the way and looks at this bonfire. And this corridor is quite narrow, though. So with this bonfire, it does create a bit of a barrier between you and this kobold. So with that, do you have anything else you want or can do, or is that your turn?
I can lob another firebolt at him.
All right, go ahead and roll attack.
And will. 16 to hit.
Ooh, that most definitely hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
6 points of fire damage.
Oh shit! So you're just kind of getting a little frustrated that the bonfire didn't do anything. You go ahead and throw a revenge firebolt, and goes ahead and like strikes this kobold right in the chest, and he just kind of squeals as the flames envelop him from both sides, kind of consuming his head and his and all the way down his body until he is just completely burnt to a crisp, and that kobold is gone.
Okay. I will continue on down that area then.
All right, you go ahead and head back down this corridor, and you go ahead and run forward, and the corridor kind of takes a sharp right turn. Do you go ahead and keep going, or is there anything else you'd like? Okay, so you go ahead turn down that corridor. You don't see anything, but the corridor is leading to a kind of more wide open area you don't remember seeing in this church. It's almost like a rather large T-shaped room, and as you get closer, you can see it's a very comfortable looking living space. It's got like a very soft chairs. It's got a window viewing the dark void outside. There's a bronze chandelier dangling above from a chain, and most of the candles are lit, but a few of them are just kind of blown out. And looking around this room, you don't immediately notice any particular presences, but you do notice uh, a door on each wall, and or a door on each of the three main walls. So one to your left, one right in front of you, and one to your right.
Okay, I will take the right door first.
All right, you go ahead and open that door, and inside is an office space, and you can see that Tara is sitting there, and she's just kind of writing in a bit of a journal, and she sees you open the door, and she's like, "Oh,
Burning hands."
oh, all right." So with that being the case, go ahead and is that a saving throw, or is that just a regular attack?
That is a dexterity saving throw on her part.
All right, dex saving throw. Oh shit! She goes ahead and she just rolled natural 20. So
She still takes half damage though. So
all right, go.
So she's still gonna take 8 points of fire damage.
All right, so you go ahead and as you do this, you kind of burn her just enough, and she goes, "Soren, what are you doing?" And she just kind of backs off, and she's just kind of staring at you in bewilderment, but she doesn't really do anything else.
Then I'm gonna keep lobbing.
All right, go ahead and roll attack.
And this will be a firebolt this time.
All right,
That is only a 12.
that still hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
Okay. 6 points of fire damage.
All right, so you go ahead and see this the firebolt just envelop her body, and she's screaming and she's shaking her head, and she's just staring at you with her eyes, and like you can kind of see tears forming, and as she's screaming, she just kind of falls to her knees and just silence. She just stops moving, and she has completely fallen.
But she's not disintegrating or anything?
Yeah, you don't see this. Her body has just been charred to a crisp.
Ooh, interesting. Feeling very uncomfortable. I'm gonna go over and poke her.
All right, so you go ahead and poke her, and nothing happens. It's just the burning corpse is all that's left.
Ooh. Well, that might be who I was after then. I am going to go ahead though and try and make sure that the other rooms are also empty.
All right, so go ahead and make an investigation check.
Okay. 17.
Nice. So you go ahead and go into the room that was initially directly in front of you, but now is to your right, just kind of coming out of this room from the right. And you can actually see a number of church members just kind of standing in a kind of like a very small circle, and they're just kind of praying, and they don't even notice you coming in.
Oh boy, here go the fireballs.
All right, go ahead.
I'm just gonna start throwing.
All right, go ahead and roll attack.
First one is a 19 to hit.
All right, that most definitely hits. And do you just want to roll attack for the other ones? There are about 4 of them here, so you can,
Okay,
and none
so
of them are going to do anything.
19, 14, 16, and 2.
All right, so all but 1 hit. So go ahead and roll damage for the other 3.
Okay, 6, 7, and 10.
All right, so as you go ahead and throw these, and you're just you're kind of throwing them in a bit of a fury at this point, just because you're used to the mindset that anyone you see here is an enemy. And as you're lobbing these fireballs, like one of them just kind of flies far and hits a bookshelf in the back and just kind of burns a couple of the scriptures back there, and they fall to the ground. These 4 church members are so close together that even the one that you missed is still burning along with the other members, and as they're burning, none of them actually react. They're still praying, but their bodies just kind of slowly disintegrate into ash, and then you eventually stop hearing their voices, and They're still standing though, even though their entire top halves have been disintegrated, and then finally their bottom halves of their bodies just kind of crumple down to the floor, and there's nothing left of them.
Great. Uh, yeah, I will just continue through the rooms.
All
Just
right, then go ahead.
fervent. She thinks she's got the one she's looking for, but just in case.
Just in case. Oh yeah. So you go ahead and go back to the room that was furthest to the left. Go ahead and make. Actually, for this, make a dexterity saving throw.
Ooh, that is a 20.
Ooh, not. All right, that's not bad though. So as soon as you open the door, you uh, you see this dagger come flying right out of the room at like just some inhuman speed, and you manage to quickly just move right to the left of it, and you see it fly and just kind of clatter and just kind of skitter off to the floor. You look inside, and you can see Lucius standing there, and he is just staring at you with eyes of bewilderment. He's like, "What? What are you doing?" And he's going to go ahead and unsheath his sword, and I want you to go ahead and roll initiative.
Okay. That is a 7.
All right, yeah. Unfortunately, he's going to go ahead and attack first. So with that being the case, I should have pulled up his character sheet ahead of time. Don't mind me. All right, so he's going to go ahead and make an attack on you here. Ooh, okay, yeah. That would be a 4.
Yeah, no, he does not quite hit.
All right, yeah. So he actually he was sitting behind a desk when he threw that dagger, and he gets up off the chair, stands up onto the table that he was standing at, and he goes ahead and he tries to jump and slice at you, but like he just kind of slides off the table right on time, and his attack goes wide and just completely misses you. And with that, he just kind of stands back up and he looks up at you, and his eyes are just wide and they're bloodshot, but he does not look angry or anything. He's just kind of staring at you, but he doesn't do anything else. He just kind of stands ready. What do you do?
Oh man. I really hope this guy's an enemy. I'm gonna burning hands him.
All right.
Dexterity save on his part.
Dex save. Oh my gosh. The dice. That would be a 9.
Yeah, he does not make that save. Alright, he has taken 14 points of fire damage.
Ooh, all right. So let's go ahead and take that. All right, so you go ahead and get in close to him, and he just kind of burns. And as soon as you do, it just like you see his cloak starting to sizzle and burn a little bit, and he just kind of backs off. And he's only slightly wincing in pain, but he does not look all that damaged.
Oh lordy, I'm in trouble.
So, is there anything else you'd like to do?
Oh boy, she would not run away from this, so she's gonna stick it out. She's gonna stay.
All right.
That's all I can do. So.
All right. So with that, you go ahead and you're just kind of staring up at him, and he just looks up at you, and he doesn't even say anything. He is going to go ahead and try to take another swing here. Oh, that. My goodness, these rolls. That would be an 8.
Yeah, no, he does not hit me somehow.
So he's just like looking at this sword. It actually, looking at it closely, it's actually it looks a little heavy for him. He goes ahead and tries to swing upward, and he like has to kind of use his own body weight to swing it up, but it's like it's so slow you can kind of easily see it, and you just kind of back out of the room, and he's just staring at you, and he's like, they're dead, they're all dead, and he's just gonna kind of again get into a battle ready stance as he just kind of looks you over. What do you do?
I'm gonna say, Lucius, are you real? And then I'm gonna hold my attack. If he attacks me again, I will hit a firebolt.
All right. Good enough. So as you say that, he kind of tilts an eyebrow, and he's like, I'm real enough. What about you, though? And he's going to go ahead and try to take another swing. So go ahead
Alright,
and,
that triggers my firebolt.
yeah,
That's a 17 to hit.
that most definitely hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
Oh, 10 points max damage.
Yeah, nice. All right. So as you go ahead and throw this firebolt at him, it impacts with his chest, and it just kind of burns across him. And now he's starting to kind of struggle a little bit, but he's patting the flames out, and you can see like through his charred robes, like his skin is starting to get a little burnt up, but he's still standing strong. Is there anything else you'd like to do?
That's all I can do on my turn.
Fair enough. So with that, he is going to go ahead and make another swing at you, because that's apparently all he can do here. All right, that would be an 11.
An 11 just hits.
All right, so at that, he's going to go ahead and roll damage. That would be... All right, so you go ahead and take 4 points of slashing damage as he brings his sword down and just kind of cuts right across you.
Oh boy, that hurts.
And with that, he doesn't do anything else. He just kind of backs up and he stares at you, and like his eyes go wide again, but then like he furrows his eyebrows and then kind of holds the hilt of his sword with both hands, but he's not doing anything else. What do you do?
I'm gonna speak again. Lucius, if you're the real one, you need to let me know. And then I'm gonna lob another firebolt at him.
All right.
That is an 18 on the die.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that definitely hits.
And he's gonna take another 16, or sorry, not another 16.
Oh my
another
gosh.
6 points of damage.
All right, 6 points of damage. All right, so now that you've launched this other firebolt at him, and this one actually impacts with the left side of his face, and he just kind of he struggles and he drops his sword as he's kind of clutching at his face, and it's just kind of burning the skin, and he's like kind of slapping himself to pat it out, and he with his sword on the ground, he cannot focus. He's going to go ahead and just kind of try to take an unarmed strike at you. Let's see. That is 8 to hit.
That does not hit.
Yeah, he goes ahead and just kind of swings with his right fist, but like he can't see through his left side because he is just burning, and he doesn't even get close to you. You don't even have to dodge or anything, and he just kind of falls to his knees. He's just kind of clutching his face, and his back is towards you. What do you do?
Oh man. I hate it when people mess with my brain. Am I supposed to kill him? Am I not supposed to kill him? I'm gonna lob that firebolt.
All right, roll attack.
16.
That definitely hits. Go ahead and roll damage.
2 points of fire damage.
Unfortunately, that is enough. You go ahead and lob this firebolt, and it just, this time, as it collides with his back, he doesn't even struggle. He just kind of sits there and lets the flames kind of consume his entire body, and he just kind of looks up at you, and you can see his green, like just one green eye, because he's still clutching the left side of his face. And he just goes, "Why?" And then he just collapses. And then
I don't know.
you look outside, and you can see that daylight has now returned. And you can hear birds chirping. The church is entirely silent, though. You just can't hear anything.
And this is... So the actual dead body of Lucius is sitting in front of me now?
Yes.
Stayed?
Yes, this is the corpse. It has stayed. And go ahead and actually make a perception check for me.
It's only a 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then, yeah, you see his corpse just laying there, and it has just shriveled up, and is just still kind of very lightly burning, but he is not moving or anything like that.
Oh, you old fool. Why are you asking me why? Why you? Christ. I'm gonna go try and find Ben.
All right, so as you turn around, you actually see Ben kind of charging into the room, and he's holding a sword, and he looks at Lucius, and he looks up at you, and he's like, "Oh my god, what have you done?"
It, you said we should kill everybody so that we can get out.
And I didn't say anything like that. And he goes and looks around the other rooms, and you can see behind him there are other members of the church, and they're kind of clutching their books, and they all have like these panicked expressions on their faces, and they're looking around. And Ben's just looking around, and he's like, "They're everywhere." And he looks up at you, and he's like, "Why would you do this?"
What do you mean?
And then
You told me to.
you can see a uh, another goblin kind of walking up to you. It's a male goblin this time, and he kind of stares at you. And he definitely looks like a very elderly goblin. His eyes are just barely open, and he's wearing these thick frame glasses that just kind of barely hang on the bridge of his nose. And you know him to be Kinsiri Aldora, and he is actually the head of this church. And he looks up at you, and he goes, "Is it true? Did you just kill Lucius?"
I did, but I
And
was in some kind of other world, and Ben told me to that we had to get out. We had to find the traitor.
and he only like he just kind of waves his hand as soon as you mention that you did, and he kind of looks at Lucius's corpse, and he kind of looks back up at you, and he goes, "Get out." And you can see the other church members are starting to kind of gather around the room, and they're all looking at you with bewilderment, and you can see Ben behind them, and uh, he looks at you. And go ahead and make a quick actually, yeah, go ahead and make a perception check.
8.
Okay. Well, I mean, still, you can cut. You see that he mouths the words that you loosely, uh, like you can. You only pick up one word, and he just says "outside," and he goes ahead and walks out of the hallway, and he just goes ahead and leaves, and all these other members of the church are just kind of glaring at you.
I'll start backing out, mouthing I'm sorry.
All right. As you go ahead and back out, do you follow Ben outside of the church?
I do, yeah.
All right. So you go ahead and go outside, and you see that uh, he walks towards one of the horse-drawn carriages, and he goes ahead and pays the driver a couple of silver, and he looks at you and he's like, "Come on, get in."
I'm gonna get in.
All right. And you go ahead and get in, and the driver kind of snaps the reins and starts taking the carriage south outside the commercial district and into districts that you haven't seen before. And as you're sitting there, Ben's just kind of staring outside, and he just looks at you and he goes, "That was a good thing you've done today."
What are you talking about?
He looks at you with kind of a grin, and he's like, "Remember what I mentioned from the scriptures? That world was created by false prophets, and Lucius was a member of them." And he goes ahead and rolls up the sleeves of his robes, and you can see on both wrists he has this black tattoo that's kind of like an emblem of a like a spiral with spikes on each end, and it's surrounded by like these three pointed, almost crossbow bolt looking emblems. And he's like, "I'm from the One True Church, and that was your initiation."
What?
And he laughs and he's like, "I understand if you're confused, but we in the One True Church believe that any who are outside of, well, our practices well, let's say not quite on our side. So we like to assure that they are taken care of swiftly. And I've been in this place long enough to know that you are quite skilled in the arts of arcane magic, and we wanted you on our side." And he goes ahead and gestures toward the carriage driver, and ahead of you, like you look at him, and now that you look at him closely, you can see he's this very tall, uh, half-orc man, and he's got like this very dark jacket on with the collar popped up, and he kind of looks at you with these piercing yellow eyes, and like with the way the collar's up, you can't see like the bottom half of his face, but he just kind of glares at you, nods, and kind of turns back around. And
So that wasn't fake then. That actually happened.
and then Ben just kind of says, "Well, I may have put on a tiny bit of a show to assure that you would, go through with it."
What was real then and what was fake?
And uh, Ben just kind of holds his hands out, and you look outside, and you can see the city kind of fade. Like it fades into kind of this purple light, and you hear, and you can see some of the rats you found earlier kind of scurrying around. And Ben's like, "Well, whatever you see, you can assume is real because, well, that's just how perception works, I suppose." And he just kind of laughs, and he's all, "Well, I am here to welcome you into the one true church. Do you agree to the terms?"
What are the terms?
"Well, you've seen them. We kill any who we see as an enemy."
An enemy to who? You haven't even told me who the one true church serves.
And he just kind of laughs, and he's like, "Have you seen me reading the scriptures? We are the true worshippers of Giselle. Anyone else who says they worship Giselle are very much not worshipping the right one. And we are here to set the world straight."
Oh, right. This is a real confusing time. I guess. Yes?
And as soon as you say that, you kind of see everything around you freeze. The carriage stops moving, and even Ben seems to kind of frozen in place. And you look out to your left, and you're no longer in the city, but you can see kind of the purple light that was once there kind of fade into white. And go ahead and make a quick perception check.
My perception check sucks. 6.
Uh, so you do kind of hear footsteps from somewhere, and they're echoing almost as though you're in some large chamber, but you don't necessarily see the source of them. And you hear a woman's voice speak up, and she says, and her voice just kind of echoes along with her footsteps, and she goes, "This is not the place you belong. I'm afraid you've answered incorrectly."
What?
And now the white kind of starts fading away, and you can see now you're in this very high steepled temple. It doesn't look like any church you've been in. The entire architecture is made of just pure white marble, and it's very just smooth and elegant, and basically the entire walls consists of arched windows with pointed tops, and looking outside, you can see blue sky, and you can see cliff sides where ocean waves are crashing against them. And in front of you, you can see this kind of a shorter human woman clad in leather armor with short hair, and she looks at you, and she just goes, "Looks like you've been through a lot. You all right?"
Where the hell am I?
And she just kind of laughs, and she goes, "Yeah, it's natural to be confused. Don't worry. I'm not going to make you kill anyone like that crazy guy did." And as she goes out and walks towards one of the open windows and looks out towards the ocean, and she goes, "We, my friend, are in Elysium, and I'm here to ask you, were you about to join the one true church?" And she just kind of turns around and just kind of glares at you with kind of a confused look, but it's still a glare nonetheless.
I don't really understand what's going on at all, to be honest.
And she just kind of nods, and she's like, "Yeah, I can understand that." And she kind of walks towards you, and she just says, "Well, one thing's for sure. A lot of people are in trouble. You're most definitely in trouble. So we're definitely going to get you some help." And she kind of pats you on the shoulder and starts leaving the temple. Do you go ahead and follow?
I do. I have no idea what else to do. I'm
so,
just kind of following along in like a puppy dog daze.
so yeah, just I certainly wouldn't blame you. Just everything happening, it's so overwhelming. And this woman in front of you, she just kind of looks towards you, and she's all, "Oh, come on!" And she kind of grabs you by the wrist and kind of brings you on a little faster. And outside, you can see that this temple is on this very narrow cliffside, covered in grass, and all around it, it's almost like a very short peninsula. You can see about 50 feet below, just all ocean below you. And as you look up, you can see this massive field. It's just all grassland, and then to the right and left are thick wooded areas. But all the way across, you can see a castle on the other end of these grasslands. But as this woman is dragging you along, this strange world kind of starts turning white again, and then the woman finally stops right in the middle of the field, and she looks at you and she goes, "Don't worry, you'll get time to rest soon. Do you have any questions about, well, where we are for that matter?"
Well, you said we're in Elysium, so who are you?
She goes, "You'll learn my name soon enough." And she snaps her fingers, and you just hear, and this large oval portal comes up, and it's just kind of glowing blue and purple, and it's kind of swirling inward. And go ahead and make an Arcana check with advantage.
That is going to be a 19.
That is perfect. You kind of look in the portal, and you do not sense any sort of malevolence coming from this portal. It actually kind of feels a little warm. Like, it's this kind of warmth you've had, like, in deep meditation in the past when you felt almost as if Giselle was kind of standing there with you. And you kind of you get this feeling of longing, like something pulling you towards the portal. And the woman looks at you, and she kind of gestures towards the portal, and she's like, "After you. I promise it's safe."
Yeah, people have been telling me a lot of things today, but all right. And I'll go through.
All right, so you go ahead and walk through, and as you do, just the entire world starts turning into this purple and blue swirl. And with that, that is where we're going to continue in the main story.
Okay. Mindfuckery.
Oh, yep, gotta love it.
Can't
Well,
wait.
yeah, hopefully we will be able to begin next Wednesday, so long as everyone's free. We still have two more players who
Right.
haven't made their characters, but I figure, you know what, might as well start with the main story. And
Yeah, if
you're
they're gonna slack off, they can join later.
Oh, exactly. That's why I figured, you know what, we've waited long enough. Let's just begin the main story. But yeah, your character definitely went through something.
Oh man, she's gonna have some bad dreams for a while.
Oh yeah, gotta love character trauma. All right.
All right, thanks, Jacob.
All right. Thank you for joining me, and have a good night.
You too.
All right. Bye. And thank you for joining us on this episode. That was certainly something. And I look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday when hopefully we have the main party.